What is up, y'all? And today we're going to be talking about the recent controversies with the launch of Dawntrail. So, first thing I want to do is I want to give you my opinions on what I see and kind of where I'm standing. There's not going to be any spoilers. I'm going to read some comments from people from Steam as well as some people on Metacritic. I'm not going to go to Reddit or anything like that. And I will cut out anything that does have any spoilers. That said, where I'm standing, my Dawntrail launch has been pretty good, and that could be in part because I'm not actually at Dawntrail in the story. I am still in Endwalker. So let me just preface this by saying that I think that technically wise, I haven't had any issues, and I have not heard of anybody having any issues. The only thing I've seen is some people complaining about less than super long queues, which is kind of crazy, but because considering Endwalker's launch, I'm just happy where they're at now. That said, I haven't gotten into the Dawntrail story, and I'm still in Endwalker, but I have been playing Pictomancer. And Pictomancer kind of gives me a kind of view into how they're writing stuff. It might be a different team or a different group of people that are writing these quests, but from what I can see from the Pictomancer quest line is they're still being creative. They still have some cool ideas for stories. And actually, I think that the Pictomancer quest line was more fun than most of the other class or job quests. So, obviously, I'm still level 83, so I'm not far into it. That said, I have recently been reading about some of the complaints that people have. From what I can gather, most of it is about the story. From my viewpoint, and I will be arguing against and for what people say in this video, but I kind of want to give you guys a rundown of what's going on. But from my viewpoint, I see that people don't like change, if that makes sense. People are seeing that there are new characters that they have not had time to fully grasp. And, that said, there have been characters like that in Final Fantasy where, they just throw somebody in and you're like, oh, that guy's gonna die. Or, oh, I don't care about this person. So, them dying does not bother me at all. Or certain things like that. Those are the only two things that came to my head at the moment. But that has happened in the past, so I can understand where people are coming from. That said, I think that a lot of times when you are moving the focus of your lens from one thing to another thing, especially if that one thing is finished, people can have a hard time transitioning. So it is up to the writers to be able to make it so that people do like it. Now, that being said, from what I understand is it's mixed, but it's still leaning positive. And I think a majority of people did like Dawntrail, even if some people dislike it. So I want to go ahead and jump into what people are saying on Steam, and let's get into it. All right. So if we go here on Steam, I'm going to find a negative one. Okay, so this is the top rated negative one, I believe. Yes. All right. This would be the first Final Fantasy XIV expansion that I didn't just dislike, but very much hated. The fault is 100% with the poor writing compared to any prior FFXIV story expansion. It's interesting because usually when something launches, it's because of technical issues. But again, what I said earlier is probably why people are having issues with it. The first 60 to 70% of the MSQ is a massive slog. So much of it doesn't matter, and it feels like filler to get to the last part, where there's some excitement. There are so few memorable characters and or places, again, until the last part. Everything feels inconsequential. The Warrior of Light doesn't need to be here. They're just being dragged along, watching very boring things play out. Lazy trope after lazy trope. The conveniences and contrived dialogue / events were so hard to get through. Alright, so with this paragraph, I get where they're coming from, but I would say that the only expansion that I didn't feel like there were times when there was a slog was probably Heaven's Ward. Heaven's Ward was so dense with the story. But a lot of like Realm Reborn felt like a massive slog. However, what he's saying this, and he's saying it's irrelevant. We don't know that, because in the future it could be totally relevant. Just because it doesn't play out now doesn't mean that it's irrelevant. Though it is still important to think about, can you retain these people if they think it's irrelevant and you don't let it play out within a time period, like a time period where they're still playing. So that's also something they have to think about. Anyways, you can tell there were a few moments when they wanted the player to feel something: emotion, happiness, excitement. But I felt nothing during most of this story. You can introduce someone to me 5 minutes prior and expect me to care about them. Or you can't introduce someone to me 5 minutes prior and expect me to care about them. I understand this is a new story being told, but it feels like almost none of this is ever going to matter again after this expansion. I mean, I could have somebody play Realm Reborn and they could say the exact same thing. So much of the Realm Reborn was just world building and like building on things that would matter later. And some of those things didn't play out until like Stormblood. So I don't know if I totally agree with this. The Crystal Tower came out in Heaven's Ward? And it didn't play out until Shadowbringers. So this is something I just don't agree with. I think I feel like the shallowness or the depth of emotional character kind of makes more sense to me. You don't necessarily like something after 5 minutes. But, they're probably exaggerating. The dungeon and trials were good. There were some fun new mechanics. The jobs feel fun. New skills and spells seem fun. Graphics update is nice. It does look good. The message of the game feels very ham-fisted. They really are trying to shove it down your throat throughout the entire MSQ. The message isn't bad, it just could have been told through 2 or 3 quests instead of the entire MSQ. Okay. The new zones feel like a lot of work went into designing them, and with how big they are, it's unfortunate that so much of it will probably never be visited again all that much. Doubt it. Especially later zones, which are very unique and very interesting. The trailer was misleading in how it made you feel some characters would be around more, and the choice of narrator was awful. I don't care about this person. I have no reason to. Yet they get an entire boring storyline. It's clear the Shadowbringers/Endwalker crew wasn't present here. If this is the route FFXIV is going, I can't see continuing my future support. Okay. If I'm going to be totally honest, I think this guy is a doomer. He's not looking forward. Almost everything that I would say the majority of things set up in one expansion are either played out in the post MSQ or the next expansion or expansion after that. So, I kind of understand where they're coming from, and it's not successful if someone doesn't feel like that's going to happen. But, I mean, that could be also an issue with the person. When I played Realm Reborn for the first time, that shit was boring, okay? It was very boring. To a certain point. Once I got to level 25, 28, something like that, it started getting really fun. really interesting, I should say. And luckily I had friends that told me that I should keep playing. So when they say something like this, they don't feel like they're ever going to go back to these places or whatever. Historically, that's not the case for any of these. For instance, in Shadowbringers, you go back to several of the zones that you leveled in, and it was like extensively. It's not like you just go visit or something. You're playing in those zones, and I totally disagree with that situation. I don't know. Maybe he's right. It could be. I don't know if you could say that this is necessarily not recommended. I don't really like this Steam system because I actually think they probably would have put a mixed score instead of this. Let's read this one. Spoiler free. This was done yesterday. Summary. Expansion that's thankfully carried by practically everything but the story. If you rate Dawntrail on the basis of zones, music, dungeons, trials, etc., it's a phenomenal expansion. With a story, oh well, I'd still recommend it, but seemingly mismatched intentions, lackluster writing, and pushing certain characters in every crevice will disappoint a lot of MSQ-oriented players. Okay. So this guy... Okay, I think there's a magnitude of difference between the skill of writing from this guy and the last guy. So, not to hate on that guy. That guy obviously has his own opinions and stuff. But this guy kind of understands the breadth of people. Which is kind of crazy. Like, he wrote this very well so far. I would say that for me, specifically, the zones, music, dungeons, trials, and all that is probably more important than the story. But I do like the story as well. This is interesting because he says, and I think that's what the other guy was trying to say, but was not really able to kind of convey, is that they are pushing certain characters into every crevice. That makes sense. I mean, I could see that being why people don't like it because, yeah, for instance, it's like people that complain about things like, I mean, this is not a great example, but people complaining about things like virtue signaling. I could understand. I don't think that people actually care about the virtue signaling. I think they care about the idea of something being pushed into a story that they felt was unnecessary, I guess. So I don't know. It's kind of similar to that, I guess, but it's almost like being forced into a story. It's like ham-fisted, I guess, was what the guy was saying. I don't know. We'll read on. Find your wings and spread them wide. I'd like to keep it brief, as with everything you should experience the expansion by yourself. This review isn't supposed to steer you towards buying it or not, but mostly as a recollection and subjective opinion. If you're an active XIV player, it's simply impossible to partake in the game without latest expansions. So hey, at least you'll know what you're getting into. The first 6 hours is a slog. Wow, okay? Which mostly consists of you walking, talking to people, and exploring the extremely well-crafted areas. In fact, you basically encounter minimal fighting before the first dungeon, which is a precedent for the entire MSQ. I dare say that it was as bad as pre-nerfed ARR Wine Arc. Okay. So, hold on. Before we keep going here, that does sound not great, but it also sounds like they're setting up for a new story, which is what ARR was. Anyways, which should tell you exactly everything. Instead of a sense of adventure and exploring new content like trailer would like you to imagine, it's more akin to watching a YouTube vlogger visiting these places themselves, an extremely annoying vlogger. And her name is Wook Lamont. I really tried to like Wook though my entire experience, and I have to say that towards the end, she wasn't horrible, just bad. Jesus. Or maybe it's the Stockholm Syndrome from spending so much time with her. Her entire presence is so overwhelming that basically being tedium to you. Besides being tedium to you, she actively makes all other characters worse. Really, it feels like the writers made her important to the point of others not receiving proper development. Especially after the halfway point, a lot of those you meet have seemingly really interesting baselines that are sadly not explored or developed. Why? Because Wook Lamont. A lot of story beats could be way better without her, especially right at the end. I'm not saying that she's the worst character in the expansion, because a certain redhead is. Oh no. That could be, I hope it's not. But anyways, but considering that more than 90% of quests include her, Jesus, she'll get tiresome extremely quickly. 90%? Jesus. Nevertheless, I like some of the bits of the story, and ending was nice. It would be nicer without her, though. Yeah. Aaronville and S better deserved way better. Uh-oh. No Limits will bind me. Now, everything else, Zone's great music, phenomenal. Great music, phenomenal. Dungeons and Trial, phenomenal. Two hub cities are distinct and different from each other and offer something fresh compared to everything we've seen so far. One nitpick I have is that the second one is tad too spread out, but sites are great. Both Dungeons and Trials aren't too easy and aren't too hard, either giving a fair difficulty. If you die, it's mostly a skill issue and not the design of the encounter. Not much I can say without spoiler territory, but I can assure you those are the best encounters in entire Final Fantasy XIV. Pictomancer and Viper, from my limited experience, are fun classes, Viper especially so, with given challenge of learning and busyness, which is getting adjusted for some reason, and should be easy to pick up. Overall, everything that's not MSQ story is great. I'm sure people who don't care about it and skip everything will have a swell time. They'll have to skip a lot though. Oh man. If I have to rate an entire expansion without the story, it's an easy 9 out of 10. Great, amazing. Problem is, you can't. And I just can't think of a proper score for it overall. What's fair? How should you weigh different elements? I leave that, my dear viewer, to you. Thank you for reading. Okay. I mean, that's a good review, I think. I think it was fair. He laid out what was wrong. I don't know who Wook Lamont is, so probably a new character. It does sound annoying. However, with that said, I think that ARR was made the way it was to set up for going forward. That said, they have been making this game for over 10 years, and they should know how to do it better than what people are saying. I don't know that you could say, unless you're like purely MSQ Andy, I don't know that you could say that it's bad because both of those reviews have said that everything is good except for the story. Unless you're an MSQ Andy, that's the only thing that matters to you, then I don't know how you could review it as negative. But anyways, let's move on. Alright, so now we have the Metacritic. So as you can see, oh god damn it. As you can see, it has a 76 and a 6.9. Okay. So a 76, I believe, is the lowest score of any expansion for FFXIV. Alright, I don't too much care about the latest. I want to read let's do a one positive, one mixed, and whatever. Okay. Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail is a great expansion that has a lot to offer. The graphics update is really good, and the Final Fantasy music is still a masterpiece. The main story questline is okay, but unfortunately not as outstanding as players had hoped. Nevertheless, the new world of Dawntrail is worth a look for every MMO fan, as there are new dungeons, new jobs, new decorative items, and much more. Mixed reviews. If you wanted more of the same old online Final Fantasy, this is what you'll get. But I wanted something more. If Dawntrail is to be a new chapter, a potential start of a new saga, it needed a better opening, not this boring thing. Time will tell what will come of this. Interesting. There are no negative reviews. Oh, there's only 4 reviews. Interesting. Okay. Let's read what people are saying. Oh, God. Okay, let's read this one. This one seems better. I know there were some difficulties with the new rebirth, but the main characters who experienced the dawn moon since the new rebirth, I have no idea I don't know what he's talking about. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what negative is. Okay, so it does look like it is almost all revolving around the story. For me, I would say that the story is a big part, but it's not as big as some people are saying. That's kind of crazy to me. Well, anyways, that's what people are saying. It's all about the story. It could be boring, you know. It could not be. I don't know. It does look like most people are saying that it is kind of boring, and it's kind of a slog. But with that said, you know, ARR was that way, and even I would say Stormblood for a lot of it was that way. But they ended up being great in the end. And that's post MSQ, especially for ARR. So I think that we have to look forward to see what is going to happen in the post MSQ. I'm going to be playing this. I'm going to be getting past Endwalker and going into Dawntrail very soon. So you guys stay tuned, and I'll give you an updated version of what I was thinking. Probably at the next update. But with that, I think that's it, and I'll see you all later. Peace.